talking about SQL Server Configuration with dbatools, dbachecks. I'm Tracy Boggiano. A little bit about myself. I work at DocuSign. I have over 20 years experience with SQL Server. There goes my contact information. The easiest way to find me is just go to databasesuperhero.com. My email address is available there along with my Twitter, LinkedIn, and all the other various ways you can contact me. I have a whole lot of icons on here. Some of them need to be removed because past disappeared on us. So I'll talk about my volunteer work, which I normally do in the top right-hand corner. I'm a guardian ad litem in the state of North Carolina, which means I advocate for foster children in the court system. So I've done that for 18 years and for 56 kids at this point. And down in the bottom right-hand corner, I am on a mental health council for disability rights in North Carolina, trying to set the course for what type of things we advocate for in the state of North Carolina. So, and I'm part of speakingmentors.com so that we can try to get more speakers into the community. So those are the things that I like to broadcast. All the rest is just fluff. So we'll talk about installing dbatools and dbachecks. Just so you know, it runs on Pester, but Pester 5 breaks dbachecks, so don't install it by using the defaults. The first thing you're going to want to do is install Pester with the correct version. So this is the correct syntax for that so that you don't end up with Pester 5. If you go to install the module for dbachecks, you will automatically end up with Pester 5, and then you will be in the SQL community Slack asking what happened. Then you can install the module for dbachecks, which will automatically download dbatools because it's dependent on it. And then you'll be off and running and ready to use it. So that's pretty simple. So we'll talk about what dbatools and dbachecks are. dbatools is an open source PowerShell module started by SQL community over in Europe, but there's like over 100 contributors to it. It has like over 500 commandlets at this point. And it's made to do just about everything you can do in script and XSMS. Of course, there's some things that still haven't been added to it yet. And as you come up with those, you can go to GitHub and put in issues or contribute to it yourself so that we can eventually have everything scripted out and have PowerShell do everything for us. To illustrate some of the commands that there are, you can do a git command on the module. And this is the full command here and where you can get a list of the commands. And as you can see, there's a bunch of different commands for like adding things to an AG, backing up things, clearing out your latch statistics, your wait statistics, copying a number of things between servers. Just you got a slew of things that you can actually do here. So it's a very worthwhile project to get involved with and use because you can automate a lot of your processes using it. So what does this have to do with dbachecks? Well, dbachecks is basically the same thing as far as it's developed by the SQL community, but this actually checks your configuration on your SQL Server for your default configuration, which you can customize with some parameters and make sure that all your servers across your whole environment are configured the correct way, and you can run audits on it and make sure things are running correctly and nobody's changed like your max memory to something you don't want or your max stop. You never know, you might have some system out there where somebody accidentally ended up as a sysadmin and changed things on you, or it's just not following a correct policy. I've programmed the CIS security compliance stuff into dbachecks. So if you have to be compliant on security for that, that's available for there too. So you can make sure you're compliant on there. And we're actually working on a module for the government in America for DISA so that we can check those configurations as well. But it provides output to a PowerBI by default, which is the easiest way to visualize it. But you can also get it to a table or to a JSON file, so you can get to a table so you can query it easier, or to a JSON file so you can import it somewhere else that you find beneficial. And it all uses dbatools functions to retrieve values to be tested behind the scenes if there is one available. If not, it's got T-SQL probably encoded in it, or it's using some sort of PowerShell that if it's a Windows-related thing that it needs to check. And as I mentioned before, it uses the testing framework for Pester so that it can actually do the testing part of it. And it's a nice, easy framework to learn. So if you're looking for a project to contribute to, dbatools and dbachecks is a good one to consider contributing to. So dbachecks itself has very few commands because it's just checking things for you. Everything's behind the scenes, but they're very customizable. So this is all it has. So we're going to go over the invoke dbc check and a few on setting the dbc config values so that we can actually customize our environment for us. And as you can see, when we do a get dbc check, these are all the different things it can actually check for and then some. So there's a lot of SQL agent checks, database instance checks. So we're checking on the agent to make sure your database mail is enabled or that your service accounts is enabled. You got a database operator, whether you've got failed job things running, whether it's got a valid job owner, whether jobs have failed, whether jobs have been running long, things like that. And there's a slew of tests that can run on here, and it's just nice to have. Like, we even put suspect pages in here, so now you can see if a page ever became corrupt on your system and you just didn't know about it. And so if you run these things, you can keep up to date on your environment and know what's going on, as well as making sure the config is correct. This is a command to run to pass it all through to PowerBI. And then once you do that, you just hit refresh, because by default it's showing data that's stored in PowerBI, because that's what PowerBI does. And then you'll have your report customized to what you have sent in. So this is what the default report looked like when I first started this presentation. I have it up on my VM right now to see where we're at. It has 126 failed things. We're going to see how many failed things we have now, and we're going to try to fix as many of them we can and in the amount of time we have for this presentation. So now we're on to demos for the rest of the presentation. So we're down to 125 failed things, 126, so that's good. As you can see, our top one is all about agent alerts. If you click on it, it'll actually narrow down the results down here at the bottom and tell you which things it's missing. So it's mentioned agent alerts for the severities, and there'll be several other things like database mail in there and things like that we need to add on to agent alerts that are notified down towards the bottom and not showing up here at the top. So we're going to go in and do some of these basic things after I show you a couple of basic things about using PowerShell. So I've already ran my update modules on here, so we got the newest and greatest version. This is one way to actually find commands. This is a module built into dbatools, so you can actually go in and find one of their commands because they have so many of them. It can be kind of hard to find. Where'd my grid go? So you can actually come in here, and then you can use the criteria on the grid view and look for something that has a keyword in it and try to find a command that does something. And as you can see, there's a number of commands that you can actually use. Oh, great, my mouse is disappearing. Okay, it's back. Then you can do the same thing and tag it for agent. So if they have a tag for agent, it'll come up with the agent. Due to time, we will skip running that. But we've got our checks also for dbachecks. As you can see, there's a number of these that run on the system. And again, you can go in here and search by adding criteria and looking for keywords. So that gives you an idea of how to go and find things. Then you've got basic commands in PowerShell, where if you need to look up what a command actually does, you can just do a get help. Some of this stuff you may know just the basics of, but I wanted to cover it because it's kind of gets you started and tells you how to find examples of how things going. So if you don't know how to use something in PowerShell, you can use the get help, and it give you the basics of how to use this, and maybe some information on where to go to examples on how to do things as well, and the descriptions. And then you can get more detailed, like if you only want to see examples, or you want to get a detailed description, or you want to see the full help that they put in there, you can do that as well. And you can tell it to pull from online just in case you don't have the newest documentation on your system. So that's the basics of how to go about PowerShell and use dbatools and dbachecks to kind of check things out before you actually get started. So now let's go in and try to fix up our SQL agent alerts. So first I'm going to clear the host so that the bottom part's kind of empty for us. I'm going to set our instance name to our instance name, which is just dbatools2. The first thing we need to do is set up a mail account. So I've set a number of variables here that are going to be our defaults. Nothing major going on here. Then I'm going to set our config where these values up here are going to be our defaults that it checks against. So if you have 100 instances, you're going to always want your dbmail account to be named dbmail. You're always going to want your email address to be this, and so forth. And then we're actually going to take a look and see that those are set. As you can see, we've got your mail right here and dbmail above it, and our operator names and stuff is going to be set later. So then we're going to pull in a connection to the server because we're going to need this to do some SMO because not everything's available in dbatools for some of this. So but the first thing we're going to want to do is enable our database mail if it's disabled. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we can see here that the previous value was 0 and the new value is 1. So it was indeed disabled by default. Then we're going to actually add a database mail account. And we know it doesn't have a database mail account because I just installed SQL this morning. Then we can see that it created us a database mail account on this SQL Server. Then we actually need a database mail profile if there's a new one, and we need to set the mail profile to the default on the system. So this is the part where I had to use a little bit of SMO to get everything set correctly. But as you can tell, dbatools went in and it created everything for you. Then we're going to set as an operator. This is actually a new commandlet that I wrote because of this presentation so that we could actually create an operator. So now we got an operator created that's going to get paged, every day and get alerted on their emails and things like that. Then we're actually going to set it to be a fail-safe operator so that if we don't have another operator, it will be the one that gets notified. Now, so far, they've got a get DBA agent alert and a copy. I'm going to work on one where you can add a new DBA agent alert. So we're going to actually use SMO to add alerts at this point. But this 16 ... through 25 will tell it to add all the severity 16 through 25. And we're just going to name them severity alert 16 through 25 and add them. And then we're going to add these severity numbers here for corruption type errors. And it's just a for each loop on both of those. Then we shall run our Power BI report and see if we get our numbers down from what was failing. While that Power BI report comes up, we'll look at SQL Agent and see that we do indeed have alerts. As you can tell, we have alerts now. We do have an operator. So those type things worked for us. And we'll be able to tell by our Power BI report too once I was supposed to close that so it would actually work. Good thing it hasn't gotten to the part where it opens it. This is normally the part where I take questions, but I don't know if this is interactive or not. I shall look in the comments and see if there's anything in there. And there is not. So if there's any questions, feel free to throw it in the comments at any time, and I'll be checking them every time I run the Power BI report. This takes a minute or two to run so that we can actually see results. But it's good to check our results as we go along. Our next steps are going to be, we're going to work on all the halogram scripts. and installing those, because those are going to show up as our next biggest thing. And we'll go through that in a minute after we look at our Power BI report. Oops, too many clicks. And you can run this on more than one server at a time. You can actually run it with different names like prod and test, so that you can actually separate out your different environments so that you can see differences, because sometimes test isn't configured the same as prod and so forth like that. So there's a number of things that you can do to customize this. I'm just doing the basics of running it against one server to get everybody familiar with it. Working on it. Yay. Come on, Power BI. You can do it. Okay, we're down to 86 failed from, I think it was 126. So we're doing better. So now we're going to look at fixing up all the hologram stuff, because that's like 4 for each one of these that's failing. So let's try to get each one of those fixed up now. Remember to close Power BI this time. Clear my host. I'm going to set a couple of things, just the instance name, where I want my backup to go, and how often I want my backups to be cleaned up so I can feed it into each one of these jobs. And then I'm going to email what my email operator is going to be, because we set that up in the first page. Now, one thing you can do, which is kind of neat, is you can install the solution right off the internet with the appropriate variables that you need. Log in a table, install jobs, get everything, and we're going to place the existing one. So within seconds, you actually have the newest, greatest version of all hologram scripts installed. So now we're going to take a look at these jobs right here. Our system backups and our user backups are going to run Sunday at midnight, and that's going to be the name of our schedule. And for each one of those, we're just going to add a schedule to it that tells it to run weekly. We're going to do the same thing on our diff, tell it to run all the other days at midnight. We have to put 2 different schedules on here because because of Saturday. But now those jobs are scheduled to run. Now we want our logs to run, I say, every 15 minutes. So we got our frequency set to daily, every day, minutes 15. Then we're going to set our integrity checks to run at 2 a.m. on Saturday. Sounds like a good time, right? Nobody's busy at that time, if you can afford to run integrity checks live on your system. And the same with the optimized job for our indexes. 10 p.m. on Saturday seemed like a good time. And then all these miscellaneous jobs for cleanups and things like that, I just set all those to run every day at midnight, because it'll keep things clean. Now, for each one of these jobs in here, we do not have an operator for those yet, because you can't define those when you install it. So we're going to get back each agent job that does not have an operator, and then we're going to set the operator for it to, on failure, to email us. That way we can have alerts. So I am going to set my recovery mode on my msdb to full, so that we can simulate having some backups later. And because we do have a check for backups in here, I'm going to go ahead and run my full backups, and we have integrity checks too. I'm going to go ahead and start those jobs up, so that those will disappear off our reports as well, because those should only take a few seconds to run. And we'll give that a few seconds to run, and I will go check for questions while I go kick off the report again. Back to here. And no questions, that's okay. So you can see how easy it is to install all the hologram scripts. They have a number of other things that you can actually install very easily that we'll go over in the next slide deck, like Brent Ozar's Blitz scripts, the SP who is active is installed right off the internet. So there's things you can do to automate these and keep them up to date, because I know Brent changes his nearly monthly. So you can always have the newest and greatest versions set up. And all is you probably want to check for features before you upgrade it, but the others you probably just would automatically update. Come on, Power BI, you can do it. Power BI is so slow sometimes.
Some background music for this.
Huh?
We need some background music.
I know. This is usually when I get questions, so it's like, nobody's asking questions. Good news is I only have to load it one more time after this. And I'm talking a little bit fast, so we'll get back on schedule so everybody can eat lunch. And because I'm not taking questions, getting questions, it's not taking as long either. So hit refresh. So while that's running, we'll go ahead and go check out what my next set of code is going to be. Oh, we won't. Yes, we will. Power BI is trying to take over. Look at it. Shrunk my screen. Hate when things like this happen. Can't run two things at once with Power BI.
You can take
Okay.
to learn. Okay. So
Huh?
Okay, so all right, it's good.
Yeah. I'll just be patient. I just don't like the silence. Say silence.
Paul has a question. Do you want to take that?
Sure. Let me go back over here to look. Yes, I do keep them in master. I prefer them in master. The only time I move things out of master is if I was capturing SP who is active to a table, or Brent's first responder stuff to a table, I would put that in a DBA database. All the scripts I'm not worried about. I know he has the command log table, but he also has the thing that automatically cleans it up. So I put the others in a DBA table just in case I don't have something to automatically clean them up and to make them more efficient. So if I have all three of those installed and for some reason I'm keeping one to a table, then I would put all of those in a DBA table. Otherwise, if you're not keeping anything to a table, I would just put them in master. So can I run my checks in SQL Server Agent? Yes, you can. There's a blog post out there somewhere that shows you how to run PowerShell in SQL Agent, and then you can write it to a table or to a JSON and have something to automatically swoop up and get the results. So now we're down to 29 failed tasks. We're doing really good. We're not going to fix them all, by the way, just in case anybody thought we were. But we've pretty much got this pretty much cleaned up at this point. We've got a few other things we want to run, like SPU is active. We need to rename SA, and a few of our SP configure things need to be turned on. Query store needs to be enabled on something. We want to install a CU on our system so we can do that, and a few other things. We need our DAC turned on. That's important, our backup compression. So we're going to go in and do some of the miscellaneous stuff now. Hence my name on my miscellaneous file. So I always like to have optimized for ad hoc workloads turned on since like 2008. I'd love to have my DAC turned on since it was invented in 2005. I don't remember when backup compression was invented, but I like it. And as you've seen, it wanted our remote access turned off. So we will configure those real quick. And you can tell if we scroll back up that it changed values for us. And this one requires a restart of SQL Server for you to be able for it to see. So anytime you use a command like the set dba sp configure, it will warn you if you need to restart SQL Server because your config value needs to restart it. We won't be doing that because we don't really want to at this point. We're kind of using it. So when you install SP is active as long and all the hologram script, as the question before was, you can actually tell it what database to install it in. This one requires it, so I put it on there. So now I've got SP is active installed. And despite some errors you might see when installing the first responders kit, it does actually install correctly. And there's another project called SQL Watch that's made for monitoring your servers that you can actually install using this as well. And you can actually run Glen, Allen, Berry's diagnostic queries as well and get the output saved somewhere. So there's a number of things you can do with dbatools to do these because these are all dbatools commands. So we're going to turn our query store on. As you've seen, we had an alert for that. And the only one that we can actually turn it on is the msdb because we don't have no user databases. So we've got that turned on. And that's the only system database you can actually turn it on in. And you actually can't see any data without going to the catalog views because there's no GUI for it. Then we're going to actually rename our SA account. Go back, change what? Did not like that. We'll figure that out someday and figure out why it's not working. Let's make a note of that. I know it's worked before, so we'll have to see if there's some override that needs to be stuck in there. Let's try force. Sometimes they have those commands that need to be done. Force is not a parameter. Well, I'll have to take a look at that, and I'll fix that when I upload these scripts to my website or to C-Sharp's website if they have us upload them. There's a couple of trace flags that were popping up too that you need to enable. One is the backup thing that keeps it from going in your error logs, because if you're backing up tons of databases every 15 minutes with your T-logs, you're just filling it up. The other thing we're going to tell it to do is to not expect 117 because this is turned on by default in 2017, and we're setting these as config values at this point so that dbachecks knows to check it. And we're going to tell it to skip tempdb 1118 because that's again turned on default by 2019. So then we can tell it to actually enable the trace flag 2226 because that's the one that we actually told it to expect. And because we're using query store, there are two trace flags that you normally would want to turn on in a different environment, but those are actually defaults in 2019 as well, so we don't have to worry about those. Now, if you for some reason wanted to check for orphan files, there is a check for that. You could check for those and then go through them and delete them. That check was not popping up, so we'll skip that one. And we'll go ahead and run the PowerBI report again after we close it. So that's most of the things that are going to be fixed. Now, one thing to note is I told you I wrote some CIS security scripts for just checking security. If you just want to run something that's in a particular category, you can just put the tag here. Like you could run all the agent checks by itself and it'll output it to a file. So if you wanted to be CIS compliant, you could just run the CIS report separately. Some other commands that you might find useful while that's running is to set your power plan on your system. I know that's an old thing, but some systems still don't have them set correctly. Another thing is your cost threshold for parallelism. As I mentioned, Glen, Allen, Berry scripts can be ran to a temp folder and you have all your data output to a CSV. You can actually run database compression using dbatools and output what it does. And based on if it saves you 25%, it'll compress it. And then we're actually going to pull this trick and update our SQL Server instance once it finishes checking everything to the new cumulative update, which I did not download the new security one, but I do have the last CU before the security update. So I'm going to let that run so you can see we'll get a newer version of SQL Server, and we won't be on RTM, which is where we're at right now. And it's asking us to update it to CU8. We say yes, because that's what it's read out in my temp folder. And it's preparing to install it. So that's kind of neat that it can do that automatically for you. And you can do this across multiple servers and automate your patching system. And that's one of the checks in dbachecks, is to make sure you're on the latest build too. So that'll help fix that one up. Now PowerBI, refresh. And I'll go check for questions while it's refreshing, as always. INF, I believe they set a command up for INF. I would have to double check, but I believe that's already been set up. Is it possible to run tests where it's not included in the module? Yes, there is ways to write your own custom test and have dbachecks run it for you. There is a blog post for that, I think, that Rob Sewell wrote. If you have problems finding it, email me or DM me on Twitter, and I will find it for you and send it to you. But you can actually write your own test to be included in dbachecks if they don't have what you want to be checked. And then have it all outputted to the same Power BI report that you're getting everything else outputted to. And he has a tutorial on how to do it and everything. So okay, so we're down to 22 failed. Most of these are auto growth events, like one did auto grow because it didn't have any space to actually do anything. And then we need to set our auto growth config because it's just set up the percents and the 1 megs. So these are all things that we would have to go back in and fix. But other than that, that is the basics of running everything. And that's pretty much what I wanted to demo. And we will actually see if when our CU is done, we will check the version of SQL Server if you guys hang around for that. I kind of talked fast. Plus, I wanted to leave room for questions. So I talked fast. Hopefully not too fast. This normally takes me an hour, but I did it in 40 minutes. I did good. They only gave us 50 minutes, so. I don't see any more questions. See if our CU is done. Our CU is indeed done. But we can actually check our SQL version now and see that it's not RTM, that is CU8. Go in Azure. Why are you being so slow? And we can see that, CU6 is evidently the one I had downloaded. So that's the one it installed. Maybe I misread the 8 because 6 and 8 look awful lot alike. But you can tell it's not RTM because that's where it would have been because I just installed SQL this morning. So that's all I had as far as demos go. Jump back into PowerPoint, which there isn't much left in there. But as far as resources go, the best resources are at dbatools for their stuff, at dbachecks. They have a pretty good library. Rob Sewell blogs on dbachecks a lot because he's the main contributor to it, and dbatools keeps a pretty good links of people blogging to stuff on theirs, and it's pretty easy to Google things as well. If you ever come across anything that you don't know how to do, the SQL Community Slack has a very active channels for both of these that people answer questions. If you need me to answer questions, I'm available as well. I do not mind. I answer my emails usually within a day or two. So or my DMs that quickly as well. So if you have any more questions, I'll let you put them in there. Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you.